This is not at all my usual thing, and spoiler, this video is going to be a lot more serious than I often am. For the past several weeks, I've been a victim of a cyberstalker, and for any of you watching this who have had this happen to you, I understand, and I'm so sorry you've had to endure this. I wanted to create this video for two reasons. Firstly, to define and explain what cyberstalking is, what you can do about it, and most importantly, how you can take care of yourself while you do. Secondly, to get some closure and move on from a massive distraction that has impacted me personally, and by proxy getting the show launched for season 2. Before all of this started, when I heard the word cyberstalker, I didn't have an accurate understanding of what it really meant. Women are more likely to be a target, and 1 in 4 a year are stalked online and/or are sexually harassed. 65% of people ages 18 to 29 will be harassed and cyberstalked, according to Pew Research. I tell you these facts because this is all too common. Gamers, content creators, and personalities are often easy targets because of their visibility and how easy it is to find personal information on them. When this starts, you go through a phase of shock which turns to anger, especially if the perpetrator begins publicly harassing and defaming you. After asking them to stop, in which point they almost always refuse, the worst thing you can do is to continue contact. Victim advocacy groups and the police advise that you should immediately stop responding and cease contact with the person. From this point, you want to keep records and logs of every contact. Save emails, messages, social media posts, and photos, as a cyberstalker will commonly change, remove, or hide things after they know you've likely seen it. Do not cyberstalk them back. What happens next depends on the type of cyberstalker pursuing you. And for me, after a period where that anger turns to sadness and depression from even trying to understand why this person is doing this or even what you did, that's the worst thing. The thing that keeps you up at night, and the anxiety over what they're going to do and say next about you. Sometimes educating yourself and reading into something can help you at least find some understanding and prove to yourself that you are, in fact, a victim. For the information I'm sharing with you now, I've linked several helpful articles and sources in the notes below. But before we get into the 5 types, it's important to understand that most psychiatrists, psychologists, and mental health professionals view most stalkers as suffering from a psychiatric illness or illnesses that impact their sense of reality. They either read something into what you said, what you may have appeared to be, even how you dress, or fixate on you as part of a delusion. So no, you didn't actually do anything wrong, but sometimes understanding the motivation of the stalker can at least help to see what's going on inside their mind. The first type is what's called a rejected stalker. It's sadly the most common. The stalker pursues the victim to try and reverse a set of circumstances in a relationship that led to divorce, separation, or the ending of a friendship. They often feel misunderstood and hope to reverse the breakup, or are motivated by anger and are seeking revenge because their attempt to reconcile has failed. The second type is the one that I fell victim to, and I want to come back to that one last. Type 3 are intimacy seekers. They don't have any evil intent towards the victim. They just want a loving relationship with them. They see you as a soulmate and that you're destined to be together at any cost. In their mind, the compulsion to do whatever it takes for you to notice them, to fulfill that fantasy, is impossible to ignore. They're so blinded by their fantasy and delusion that they cannot see that what they are doing is causing harm or distress to the victim. Type 4 is similar to the previous type, but defines stalkers so enamored by their victim that they reach a state of obsession where almost their entire waking life is focused on the fantasy and mission to one day becoming a couple. While similar to the previous type, they're more gradual and calculated in their means and methods of contact. They often lack social, communication, or courting skills, but they feel entitled and deserving of a relationship with the victim. Celebrities, content creators, and gamers alike are particularly vulnerable to these last two types, and it's disgusting how many women in particular fall victim to it every year, dealing with lewd advances and inappropriate pictures. When either of these last two are rejected repeatedly or the stalking becomes a legal matter, this type can change to another type, type 5. The last type is defined as predatory stalkers, and they're often the most dangerous and determined. They're motivated by a perverse sexual need and engage in actively planning an attack or premeditating how they will go about these acts. They aren't motivated by love for a relationship and often are motivated by anger. They're fueled by a need to dominate and victimize, and psychologically speaking, often are defined as having sociopathic tendencies. They won't feel any remorse or care for the victim's welfare. And now we come back to me and what is the second type of stalker, defined as a resentful stalker. It's surprising to note that this type is considered by mental health professionals to be dangerous because of their perceived motivation for the stalking. 4 months ago, I offered a piece of advice to someone to leave a person in question alone, ending with a joke. That's all it took for the cyberstalking of me to begin. It was that simple. That person created a defamatory video on Facebook and YouTube, as well as on their website within days, but I chose to ignore it, blocked and banned the person everywhere I could. Then, this month, out of the blue, an incident not involving myself in any way started a cycle of cyberstalking all over again. Here, I need to read the exact definition of cyberstalking. Cyberstalking is the use of the internet or other electronic means to stalk or harass any individual, group, or organization. It may include false accusations, defamation, slander, and libel. It may also include monitoring, identity theft, threats, vandalism, solicitation for sex, or gathering information that may be used to threaten, embarrass, or harass. That person apparently didn't stop watching me or go away. They'd been using an alias account and possibly a VPN to bypass the block and ban that had been watching me and our Discord group the entire time. It began a cycle of 2 weeks of harassing and defaming video content, increasingly threatening and alarming social media posts, and even web pages made about me. Here's where we come back to understanding the motivation of type 2. This type is aware that the victim is aware of the stalking, but continues to fulfill a vendetta they feel is warranted, and their goal is simple: fear and distress. They believe, because of a delusion, that the victim deserves and requires being frightened because they've caused to them and or others anguish and distress. In my case, this cyberstalker took my joking comment made over 4 months ago to serve as justification to be harassed, bullied, and stalked by painting a picture that I don't like the mentally ill, have something against the mentally ill, or endorse harassment of the mentally ill. I've been honored by the support of a lot of people in the Fallout community the past 2 years, but for all the visibility that came with that, I tend to be fairly private. What made that claim made by the stalker so personally crushing and offensive to me is that I'm a caregiver. 4 years ago, in the middle of the night, my husband began screaming. He wasn't present and in a waking state was reliving a very long repressed trauma. He didn't know where he was or who I was, but he was experiencing it as if it was happening today, not over 30 years ago. It happened that quickly, but it opened a floodgate. He has CPTSD, a complex form that stems from an extended period of trauma during childhood. With it, he also has co-occurring bipolar, generalized anxiety disorder, and OCD. Every day, from 9 a.m. to 9:30 when his meds cycle, he disassociates, and I have to physically hold him to prevent self-harm. We changed our lives. I now work from home. So what the cyber stalker was doing was devastating to me, as it would be to anyone. The worst thing you can say to a caregiver is that you don't care. This is more personal information than I ever wanted to share, but it needed to be said. I also know that to the victimizer, they will state to themselves that you're lying or exaggerating in an attempt to counter anything that they have said as a justification of their head narrative. So they will never be able to directly, you can't counter them and get them to stop by simply being honest. regardless of being perceived by the victimizer to be justified in their actions or not. Cyberstalking is in fact a crime, and nothing warrants it. But that's enough about me. I wanted to tell you what you can do if you're being cyberstalked, and much of this is mostly relevant to content creators, and I can share what I've learned. 1. Do what you can to limit or completely block any contact or even the ability to see anything that person does. They often employ the use of multiple accounts, so do what you can do to find and block them everywhere. If you have a Facebook page, block them. You can also preemptively ban any Facebook account via Facebook user ID, even if they don't like your page. Details on how to do that are in the show notes. Block them in any games, on Twitter, Instagram, and even Twitch. Where Twitch is concerned, get some friends to help you moderate for a while you stream. And if they are willing, have them monitor mentions of you while you steer clear. 2. If the harassment continues to escalate, do not wait to file a police report. Cyberstalking is a crime. And while you will likely feel a lot of guilt and shame for even bothering anybody with something that is its base so silly, it can be incredibly serious. A police report starts a paper trail and gives you power to enforce action on multiple platforms. The police can also break through anonymity to determine the contact information of the harasser and issue do not contact orders, no matter where they live. In many instances where you feel physically threatened for your safety or that of your family, the FBI in the United States handles cyberstalking incredibly seriously, and via your local PD, they can be involved at the federal level. If the person doxes you, releasing your name, address, phone number, email, your contact info in any way, it's game over, as this is a direct, rapid response from most social media platforms and providers. 3. Deal with damage control where your name and reputation are concerned. No one has the legal right to utilize your name, your brand, or any show you create for the purposes of defamation and harassment. If they use video, audio, or graphics that are classified as original work, fair use does not apply and is grounds for a DMCA takedown, of which there are 2 kinds. YouTube by default now has an automated takedown system to flag videos or even an entire channel for intellectual property theft, and they have a 3-strike system. If your content isn't directly used in any embarrassing harassment videos, you can file a second type, a DMCA defamation takedown. This isn't automated. In my case, my writing and the entire website are protected for just $10 a month by Digital Millennium Copyright Services Limited. It doesn't matter if your content is based on an own IP or a trademark that you don't own. You can file to have anything, anywhere on the internet removed, Facebook, YouTube, or websites. They will also go directly to the company, not the individual, to escalate, dealing with those companies' legal departments. I can't say how helpful this service has been to me. If the cyberstalker is utilizing a website platform to harass, name, or defame you, you can use Whois to determine their internet service provider to locate their report abuse page. Every ISP in the world has harassment and cyberstalking guidelines in place. All you have to do is report pages you are mentioned on with their screenshots and submit. The DMCA service I mentioned earlier can also do this for you. There is no acceptable use for websites to be employed to harass people. 4. If you work for a company or are a content creator who's being stalked additionally in a game, or in which the game is somehow being used to create harassing and defamatory content, you absolutely have the right to report it, as almost all companies and even video game companies have terms of use and codes of conduct that prohibit cyberstalking. This too becomes part of your paper trail and due diligence. Discord can be complicated if you either co-admin, moderate, or own a server. While you can possibly block someone and or ban them from a server, there's nothing to stop the use of fake accounts, bots, or VPNs to bypass a server ban. This is against Discord terms of use and should be reported if and once you identify all possible alt accounts for them to investigate. There is a bot that is Discord approved and is in almost 50,000 servers, protecting 12 million users, and it's called Alt-Denifier. It's essentially a firewall and the first line of defense for any server. It requires third-party verification via any number of platforms the user can choose. It then detects if a VPN is being used or if that user has an alias or alt accounts and alerts the admins. If it detects odd behavior, IP manipulation, or spoofing, it doesn't verify the account. If the user doesn't verify, it simply kicks them. This works great for ending Discord raids. The link to read more about that is below, and it's been working really well. 6. Lastly is about you. If you're a victim of this, know that you're not alone. Dealing with this generates anxiety, fear, and uncertainty, but stand up and don't allow yourself to be victimized. Taking care of your own mental health is important, and unplugging from social media for a bit to change scenery, go for a walk, watching movies, or even just spending time with friends, taking all of this out, leave it alone, and just go for a walk can really help. It really does. It can be all too easy for a victim to become a victimizer should you give in to anger and feel the need to stalk the person back. Do not do that. That's called the victimization cycle, and it's a dark and unending rabbit hole. If someone is watching this and is conscious on any level that they've been doing the things I've mentioned here, please get help. The result in all cases for cyberstalkers isn't a rosy picture. It not only harms and destroys the lives of your victims, but where the law is concerned can destroy your own life. Don't let that happen. Get help. Talk to someone. Mental health, as I've personally learned with my husband, is something that has to be managed. For those of you who've been or are now realizing that you're a victim, you do not have to suffer in silence. Stand up. Speak out. I told someone last week dealing with abuse of another kind to never let someone turn your light out. Something I've never shared is a deep why for one of the reasons I wrote the Chad stories and created this show. Being a caregiver, you not only endured the burden of those you care for, but also your deep pain about not being able to do more for them. To not be able to take their pain away or even fix them is just about the most impotent and powerless feeling in the world. For me, as a form of self-therapy, I took those feelings and transformed them into what I hope is something positive. Stories that are as ridiculous as they are heartfelt, and if I've helped you to laugh, to think, to cry, and feel for those creations, then I've done something positive with pain, fear, and uncertainty. I hope I have. I won't be speaking on this matter further or about the person in question, but you can find resources, articles, and advice in the notes below. I'm Kenneth Figure, and I hope to see you in the wasteland.